California, mid-1970s. Long before people talked about serial predators on the evening news, before security cameras guarded front doors, before alarm systems became normal, suburban neighborhoods were quiet in a way that feels impossible today. Children played outside until sunset. Windows stayed open at night. Doors were often left unlocked. People believed their homes were private places. That belief didn't disappear overnight. At first, it cracked slowly. A woman noticed a window she swore she had locked. A man found a plate sitting on his couch, even though it belonged in the kitchen. A back gate was open, but nothing was missing. Police reports described these incidents as minor disturbances, accidental, insignificant. But inside those homes, the atmosphere changed. People began to feel watched, not during the day, at night. Footsteps seemed louder. Every sound carried weight. Then, one night, the fear became real. A masked man entered a home after midnight. He moved with confidence as if he already knew where everything was. He whispered commands instead of shouting. He tied his victims with shoelaces taken from their own drawers. Then he did something no one could forget. He stacked plates on the man's back, carefully, one by one. "If I hear them fall," he said quietly, "I'll kill her." The plates never moved. The attacker stayed for hours. He controlled the house completely. When he left, there were no fingerprints, no witnesses, no trace of who he was. California didn't understand it yet, but something had crossed a line, and it would not stop. Long before the assaults, the neighborhoods changed. People reported strange sightings. A man standing silently in backyards, someone riding a bicycle slowly, circling the same streets night after night, a figure jumping fences and disappearing into darkness. Police increased patrols. It didn't help. Inside the victims' homes, investigators found details that made the crimes far more disturbing. Drawers had been opened neatly. Food was eaten. Closets were searched. This wasn't a break-in. It was rehearsal. The attacker had been inside these homes days, sometimes weeks, before the assaults, listening to conversations, learning schedules, watching patterns. Victims later realized he knew personal details. He knew their names. He knew when the husband worked late. He knew when the house was quiet. During the attacks, his behavior was unsettling. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. Sometimes he whispered calmly. Sometimes he cried. Sometimes he laughed softly to himself. Psychologists struggled to understand what they were dealing with. This wasn't impulsive violence. It wasn't rage. It was control. The media gave him a name, the East Area Rapist. But that name didn't capture the reality. Because this man wasn't only attacking bodies, he was attacking the idea of safety itself, and he was learning with every crime. For a time, the attacks followed a familiar pattern. Then, slowly, something shifted. The violence increased, the threats became darker, the control more absolute. Until one night, the pattern broke completely. A couple was attacked in their home. They were bound, beaten. This time, the attacker didn't leave them alive. The crime scene stunned investigators. There was no hesitation, no sign of panic. This wasn't accidental. This was a decision. Law enforcement finally faced the truth they had been avoiding. This was not a serial rapist who lost control. This was a serial killer evolving. The murders spread across California. Different cities, different counties. Each jurisdiction believed they were facing a local predator. No one realized it was the same man. He understood this weakness. He exploited it. He studied police response times. He listened to radio scanners. He disappeared minutes before officers arrived. And then came the phone calls. Heavy breathing, whispered threats, sometimes years after the attacks. "You thought I was gone." He wasn't. He was watching, Then, without warning, the attacks stopped. Years passed. The fear faded into memory. Cases went cold. Families lost hope. The killer became a legend. Until 2018, advances in DNA technology reopened the investigation. Not through fingerprints, not through witnesses, through family bloodlines. A genetic match pointed to a man no one expected. Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer, a man trained to protect. Neighbors described him as quiet, short-tempered, ordinary. He lived a normal life. No one suspected the truth. When police arrested him, he showed no emotion. In court, survivors finally faced the man who had haunted them for decades. He said nothing. No apology, no explanation, only silence. After more than 40 years, the monster finally had a name. For the survivors, the crimes never truly ended. Years passed, decades even. But the fear stayed exactly where it had been left. Many victims moved away. Some changed their names, others stayed, refusing to let him take more from them. None of it mattered. They slept lightly. Every sound meant danger. Every shadow carried memory. Some victims described waking up in the night, convinced someone was standing over their bed, even years later. Relationships didn't survive. Marriages collapsed under the weight of trauma. Trust disappeared. Psychologists would later say the damage wasn't only physical, it was psychological imprisonment. The attacker had controlled their homes, their bodies, and afterward, their minds. Worst of all, they didn't know if he was still out there. 'Cause sometimes, he reminded them, the phone calls continued, heavy breathing, a voice barely above a whisper. "I remember you." These calls came years after the crimes. Long after police attention faded, he wanted them to know one thing. He was still in control. Even without touching them, he could destroy their sense of safety. For law enforcement, the cases were becoming ghosts. Evidence degraded, witnesses aged, hope faded. But the survivors kept speaking. They refused to let the story die, because they understood something deeply personal. If the story disappeared, then he truly won. What made this killer exceptional wasn't just brutality, it was intelligence. He didn't rely on luck, he relied on preparation. He studied police behavior the same way predators study prey. Response times, patrol routes, shift changes. He attacked just outside jurisdictional borders, knowing departments didn't communicate well. He used different weapons, different methods, different escape routes. And long before DNA analysis existed, he understood something crucial. If you leave nothing behind, you don't exist. No usable fingerprints, no witnesses who saw his face clearly. And one detail chilled investigators when it finally came out. He had been a police officer. He knew procedure. He knew how evidence was collected. He knew how mistakes happened. He wasn't just hiding from the system, he was hiding inside it. For decades, police chased fragments, a voice, a shadow, a memory. They built profiles that came close, but never close enough. The case became legend. A monster who vanished, until technology caught up, not through traditional investigation, but through something far more personal, family. For more than 4 decades, the case lived in fragments. Old police reports, faded photographs, voices remembered but never recorded. Many investigators retired without answers. Some died believing the killer would never be found. Then, quietly, everything changed. Not because of a confession, not because of a witness, because of DNA. In 2018, investigators turned to a tool that didn't exist when the crimes were committed: genetic genealogy, public databases, family trees, bloodlines that could not lie. They started with an unknown profile, no name, just markers passed down through generations. Slowly, patiently, they built branches, cousins, distant relatives, entire families mapped on paper, until one branch led to a man living an ordinary life. Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer, a husband, a father, a grandfather, a man who blended in perfectly. Surveillance began quietly. Officers followed him for days. They watched him shop, eat, live. They waited. Eventually, they collected discarded items, objects he had touched briefly and thrown away. A tissue, a scrap of trash. When the DNA results returned, there was no uncertainty. It was him. After more than 40 years, the monster had a face. The arrest was deliberately uneventful. No sirens, no chase, no drama. Just handcuffs closing around an aging man who had once terrorized an entire state. For the victims, the news was overwhelming. Some cried, some felt numb, some felt nothing at all, because the fear had lived with them for so long. They no longer knew who they were without it. The courtroom was filled with silence. Victims sat only feet away from the man who had shaped their lives through terror. They looked at him closely. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't threatening. He was quiet, still, empty. When survivors spoke, their voices carried decades of pain. They talked about nights without sleep, homes that never felt safe again, relationships destroyed by fear. They described the moment innocence ended, not just for them, but for everyone they loved. DeAngelo did not respond. No apology, no explanation, no emotion. That silence became its own cruelty. In 2020, the sentence was delivered. Life in prison, no possibility of parole. For the justice system, the case was closed. For the victims, it never truly would be. Because prison bars don't erase memory. They don't erase the sound of a whisper in the dark, or the feeling of being watched while trying to sleep. California learned a hard truth from this case. Evil doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it studies, sometimes it waits, sometimes it hides behind routine and authority. The Golden State Killer didn't just commit crimes, he changed behavior. People locked doors, checked windows twice, stopped trusting silence. And even after his capture, that fear didn't disappear. It simply learned to live quietly, the same way he once did. That is why this story still matters. Not because of how it ended, but because of what it took from people and never gave back.